The colony's ship Meridian fell from the stars like a broken bird, trailing fire and desperate prayers. When it finally crashed into the purple forest of the uncharted planet, 347 humans stumbled out into a world that smelled of copper and ozone. Captain Marcus Webb ordered everyone to stay close, to build walls, to trust nothing. But 6-year-old Tommy Chin had never been good at following orders. The boy didn't speak much, not in words anyway. He drew pictures instead, endless pictures of creatures and colors that existed only in his mind. His mother, Dr. Sarah Chun, worried constantly. This wild planet was no place for a child, especially one who saw the world so differently from everyone else. On the third day, while the adults argued about water supplies and defense perimeters, Tommy wandered toward the crystal trees. He'd seen something moving between them, something large and shimmering. The other children screamed when they saw dragons for the first time. Tommy wanted to get closer. The creature was enormous, easily 40 feet from snout to tail. Its scales shifted colors in the double sunlight, purple bleeding into black, then flashing with hints of silver. For eyes, arranged in pairs, watched the forest with an intelligence that made Sarah's scientific heart race with equal parts terror and fascination. When it opened its mouth, plasma dripped from its teeth like molten starlight. The colonists called them dragons because no other word fit. They called them death. Zarketh had been watching the strange pale creatures for days now. They were so small, so soft, so utterly defenseless. His kind considered them either prey or pests. But Zarketh had been cast out from his people precisely because he couldn't see other living things that way. Where other dragons saw targets, he saw beings with families and fears and purposes. It made him weak, they said. Broken. Wrong. He was hunting near the bioluminescent river when he heard the small one approaching. The child moved without fear, stepping over roots and pushing through ferns that glowed at his touch. Zarketh froze, uncertain. His warrior training screamed at him to roar, to establish dominance. His true nature whispered something else entirely. The small creature emerged into the clearing and stopped. Zarketh waited for the scream, the running, the inevitable fear. Instead, the child's face split into the widest smile Zarketh had ever seen on any being. Funny horse. Tommy laughed, clapping his hands together. Zarketh tilted his massive head, confused by the sounds. Was this a challenge? A greeting? The child approached with arms outstretched, and instinct made Zarketh rear back slightly, his tail swishing. The movement made Tommy laugh even harder. "You walk funny," Tommy said, even though he knew the dragon couldn't understand. He started mimicking the way Zarketh had lifted his front legs, prancing in a circle, like a horse, a big, funny horse. Something incomprehensible happened in Zarketh's chest. The sound of the child's laughter felt like sunlight after years of cold. Without thinking, he lowered his head to the ground, bringing one enormous eye level with the tiny being. Tommy reached out and touched the scales near Zarketh's snout. They were warm, smoother than glass, and they changed color under his palm, rippling from purple to soft blue. "Pretty," Tommy whispered. Back at the settlement, Sarah realized her son was missing. Panic turned her blood to ice. She called his name, her voice breaking. Other colonists grabbed weapons and spread out. Captain Webb organized search parties with grim efficiency. Everyone knew what lived in those forests. Everyone knew what would be left of a small boy. Tommy sat by the river, drawing in the sand with a stick. Zarketh watched, fascinated by the simple images taking shape. A circle with lines, a smile, 2 dots for eyes. The child kept pointing at the drawing, then at Zarketh, then back again. Communication. The small one was trying to communicate. Zarketh carefully extended one claw and drew his own shape in the sand next to Tommy's human figure. The boy's delighted squeal made the dragon scales flash bright gold, an involuntary response to positive emotion that he'd been punished for many times. When Sarah finally found them, she stopped so suddenly she nearly fell. Her son sat beside a creature that could swallow him whole, both of them drawing pictures in the sand like children in a park. The dragon saw her and rumbled, a deep sound that she felt in her bones. But he didn't move toward Tommy. He moved between Tommy and her, protective. "Mama," Tommy called, waving. Come meet Funny Horse. He's nice. Sarah's scientific mind raced. The dragon was protecting her son, not threatening him. Its body language, alien as it was, read as gentle, curious, even friendly. She took a slow step forward, hands raised. The dragon watched her carefully, then looked at Tommy. The boy nodded enthusiastically and patted the dragon's leg. Everything humanity thought they knew about this planet was about to change. And it all started with a little boy who saw a friend where everyone else saw a monster. Tommy began sneaking away every morning before the other colonists woke up. He'd slip past the guards, who were always watching the forest instead of looking behind them, and run to the river where Zarketh waited. The dragon learned to recognize the sound of small feet crunching through leaves, and his scales would shift to bright yellow with anticipation. Sarah knew, of course. Mothers always knew. But she followed at a distance, watching her son come alive in ways he never had before. Tommy, who barely spoke to humans, chattered constantly to the dragon. He showed Zarketh his drawings, acted out stories with wild gestures, and laughed when the dragon tried to mimic human expressions with limited success. Zarketh brought gifts, strange crystalline flowers that chimed in the wind, smooth stones from the river that changed temperature based on mood. Once, he carefully placed a small glowing fruit in front of Tommy, nudging it forward with his snout. The boy tried it and immediately spat it out, making a face that sent Zarketh into what could only be described as dragon laughter, a deep rumbling sound that shook the ground. Tommy brought human food in return, protein bars that Zarketh found revolting, but ate anyway because the child looked so hopeful. The dragon learned that refusing made Tommy sad, and sad made the boy's colors dim, which Zarketh discovered he couldn't tolerate. The communication evolved rapidly. Tommy created flashcards with pictures and words. Zarketh would tap the correct card with his claw when Tommy held him up. Friend, safe, happy, hungry. The dragon taught Tommy his own language through color patterns on his scales. Blue meant calm, red meant danger, gold meant joy, purple meant curiosity. Mama, Tommy said one morning, tugging Sarah's sleeve. Funny Horse talks with pretty colors. See? He held up a drawing showing a dragon with different colored sections, each labeled with emotion. Sarah stared at the paper, her scientific mind racing. This wasn't just friendship. This was genuine interspecies communication. She made a decision that would have gotten her thrown out of the colony if Captain Webb found out. She approached Zarketh herself. The dragon tensed when she came near, but Tommy ran between them, holding both his mother's hand and touching Zarketh's leg. Family, Tommy said firmly. It was one of his favorite new words. Sarah spent the next week learning what Tommy already knew instinctively. Zarketh was gentle, patient, and surprisingly intelligent. He understood far more than he could express. When she showed him video footage of the colony, he watched with intense focus, his scales shifting through colors that Sarah began cataloging in a journal. But outside their peaceful meetings, tension grew. More dragons had been spotted near the settlement. 3 colonists were killed during a supply run. Captain Webb tripled the patrols and authorized lethal force. The walls around the settlement grew higher, topped with electric fencing that hummed day and night. Zarketh arrived at the river one morning with his scales flickering rapid red and orange. Colors Tommy had learned meant urgent and warning. The dragon was agitated, pacing, making low sounds in his throat. He scraped symbols in the dirt with his claw, the same symbol over and over. What's wrong? Tommy asked, pressing his small hand against Zarketh's side. The dragon drew more frantically, multiple dragon shapes surrounding smaller human shapes. Tommy's eyes widened. He ran to get his mother. When Sarah saw the drawings, her blood went cold. Zarketh was trying to warn them about an attack. She tried to ask when, and the dragon looked up at the sky, then held up his claws in a pattern she'd seen before when Tommy was teaching him to count. 10. 10 of something. 10 days, she guessed. Zarketh's scales flashed bright blue, then gold. Yes, relief. Sarah knew she had to tell Captain Webb, but she also knew what he'd do. He'd see Zarketh as the enemy too, maybe even try to capture or kill him. She was trapped between her duty to the colony and protecting the dragon who had protected her son. That night, Zarketh did something unexpected. He carefully picked up a flat stone with his mouth and used his plasma breath to melt it, shaping it like clay. When he finished, he had created a sculpture of a human child riding on a dragon's back, both facing the same direction. He placed it gently in front of Tommy. Together, Tommy said, understanding immediately, "We face things together." Zarketh's scales rippled gold, and for the first time, Sarah heard him try human speech. His voice was like grinding stones and wind chime combined. Efar, Yend. Tommy hugged the dragon's snout, his small arms barely reaching halfway around. "Best friend," he corrected. "You're my best friend, funny horse." The war was coming, but now they had something the dragons and humans didn't expect. They had a bridge between two worlds, built on trust by a boy who saw past fear, and a dragon who refused to be what others demanded. Zarketh's sister came in the night, moving through the forest like a shadow made of starlight. Velkera was everything Zarketh wasn't. Fierce, proud, decorated with battle scars that glowed faintly in the darkness. She found her brother by the river, and her scales flashed angry red when she saw him. "You shame us," she hissed in their language, a combination of sounds and color patterns. "The council knows you've been meeting with the softskins." Zarketh's scales remained steady blue. "Calm. They are not what we were told. They're invaders." Velkera circled him, her tail lashing. "Empress Zalnara has ordered their elimination. 10 sunrises from now, we attack. Every warrior, every hunter. The softskins will be ash in memory." Zarketh felt his heart sink. "And you? Will you kill the small one who draws pictures? The healer who learned our language? They have done nothing but survive." Velkera's scales flickered, a brief flash of uncertain purple before returning to red. "I follow the Empress, as you should have." She paused, her voice softer. "Brother, I came to warn you. Leave before the attack. The council votes tomorrow on whether to kill you too. You become too strange, too tainted by the softskins." Before Zarketh could respond, she disappeared into the forest. He stood alone, processing what he'd learned. 10 sunrises. He had to warn them. The next morning, Zarketh approached the settlement for the first time. He moved slowly, deliberately, keeping his plasma vents closed and his scales showing peaceful blue. But the guard saw only a dragon, and fear made them foolish. The first shot hit his shoulder, burning through scales. The second caught his foreleg. Zarketh roared in pain, stumbling, and more weapons fired. He tried to back away, to show he meant no harm, but panic had taken hold of the humans. Tommy heard the commotion from inside the settlement. He knew that roar, knew it in his bones. He ran faster than he'd ever run, ignoring his mother's shouts, ignoring the guards trying to grab him. He burst through the gate and threw himself across Zarketh's wounded leg. "No hurt, funny horse." Tommy screamed, his voice breaking. "He's good. He's good." The shooting stopped. Captain Webb stood with his rifle raised, frozen by the sight of a small boy protecting a monster. Sarah crashed through moments later, positioning herself between the guards and her son. "Don't shoot," she shouted. "He's trying to warn us. That thing nearly killed 3 men last week." Webb growled. "That wasn't him," Sarah insisted. "Captain, please. Just listen." Zarketh's scales pulsed weak blue, fading toward gray with pain. Tommy pressed his hands against the wounds, crying. The dragon rumbled softly, trying to comfort the child even while injured. He lifted his head with effort and began drawing in the dirt with his claw, the same urgent symbols he'd shown before. Sarah knelt beside the drawings, translating for the crowd that had gathered. Multiple dragons, surrounding us, attack formation. She looked up at Webb. "He's warning us about an attack." "Or leading us into a trap," Webb said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Tommy pulled out his tablet, the one he used for his picture cards. He scrolled through video clips from the past weeks. Zarketh gently warming him with controlled breath on cold mornings, protecting him from a smaller predator, learning to communicate. In one clip, the dragon carefully moved a boulder that had rolled toward Tommy, then checked with obvious concern to make sure the boy wasn't hurt. The colonists watched in silence. This wasn't a monster. This was someone who cared. Zarketh managed to rasp out the human word he learned. FR, Yen, Dan, ER. An older woman named Chin stepped forward. My husband was killed in that attack last week. I wanted every dragon dead. She looked at Zarketh, then at Tommy still clinging to the dragon's leg. But this one bled to warn us. That means something. Webb lowered his rifle slowly. How long do we have? Sarah checked with Zarketh, using the counting system they developed. The dragon held up his claws carefully. 9. 9 days now. What do you propose, Doctor? Webb asked. Sarah took a breath. There's a dragon ritual, a binding ceremony. If a human and dragon can prove their bond is genuine, the Dragon Council must honor it. It could stop the war. That's insane, someone shouted. So is fighting an entire planet of dragons, Sarah shot back. This might be our only chance. Tommy looked up at Zarketh, then at the captain. Funny Horse is brave. I'm brave, too. We can do it. Webb stared at the boy, at the wounded dragon, at his desperate people. He thought of his own children, lost to an alien attack years ago. He thought of revenge and hate, and how neither had ever brought anyone back. All right, he said finally, but we prepare for both peace and war. The Dragon Council agreed to witness the binding, but Empress Zalnara's scales gleamed with cruel satisfaction when she announced the terms. Tommy and Zarketh would enter the Crucible, an ancient arena carved into volcanic rock, where dragons proved their worth through trials. Most who entered did not leave alive. Sarah wanted to refuse, to grab her son and run to the ships. But Tommy held her hand and said simply, Funny Horse needs me. The Crucible sat at the base of a mountain that breathed smoke. Hundreds of dragons lined the edges, their scales creating a rainbow of judgment. Human colonists watched through camera drones, their faces tight with fear. Captain Webb had armed his people, positioned outside the arena. If this was a trap, they'd fight their way out or die trying. Tommy stood in the center of the arena, so small he looked like a doll. Zarketh beside him seemed even larger than usual, his scales shifting between protective blue and anxious purple. The boy reached up and patted the dragon's leg. We got this. Funny Horse, Tommy whispered. Empress Zalnara's voice boomed across the arena, translated by devices Sarah had hastily constructed. 3 trials. 3 proofs. Fail and both die. The first trial, trust. The ground rumbled and split apart. A maze of passages opened, filled with geysers that shot superheated steam. The air shimmered with deadly heat. A cloth was brought forward, meant to cover Tommy's eyes. The small one must ride, blind, while the dragon guides him to the fire maze, Zalnara announced. One wrong step means death for both. Sarah's scream echoed from the drone speakers. He's 6 years old. This is murder. But Tommy was already climbing onto Zarketh's back, settling between the dragon's shoulder scales like he'd done 100 times before. The cloth was tied over his eyes, and the world went dark. Zarketh's scales began pulsing patterns that Tommy could feel through his legs and hands. Warm meant go forward. Cool meant stop. Quick pulses meant danger close. They developed this language together by the river, playing games. Now it would save their lives. They entered the maze. Steam erupted inches from Tommy's leg, hot enough to boil skin, but Zarketh had already shifted away. The dragon moved with precision, his scales communicating constantly. Tommy trusted completely, not flinching when heat washed over them or when he heard the hiss of geysers all around. Halfway through, a spark caught the blindfold. Tommy smelled smoke and felt heat near his face. He could pull it off, could see where they were going. But that would mean failing the trial. That would mean not trusting his friend. Keep going, Funny Horse, Tommy said quietly. I trust you. Zarketh's scales flashed gold so brightly that watching dragons had to look away. He moved faster, more confidently, guiding his small friend to the last section of the maze. When they emerged on the other side, Tommy's blindfold was half burned away, but he was unharmed. The arena fell silent. Even Zalnara looked surprised. Trial 2, she announced after a pause. Sacrifice. The ground shifted again. Tommy and Zarketh were separated by rising walls. Each found themselves in a chamber with 2 doors. Above one door, a symbol glowed, the symbol for self for escape. Above the other, the symbol for the other for saving someone else. Through thin walls, they could hear each other. Tommy pressed his hands against the stone. "Funny horse? Are you okay?" A rumble responded. Zarketha's voice worried. A mechanical voice spoke in both chambers. "Choose. Save yourself and escape to freedom, or save the other and face death. You have 1 minute." Tommy didn't hesitate. He ran to the door marked with Zarketha's symbol and pushed it open. Sarah screamed through the speakers as the chamber began collapsing behind him, stone falling where Tommy had just stood. In his chamber, Zarketh made the same choice instantly. He burst through the door marked with Tommy's symbol, his plasma breath melting the lock when it wouldn't open fast enough. The trap system, designed for one to sacrifice and one to be saved, short-circuited when both chose the same thing. The collapsing chambers froze. Both Tommy and Zarketh stood in the connection tunnel, running toward each other. They met in the middle. Tommy hugged Zarketh's snout, while the dragon curved his body protectively around the boy. Empress Zalnara's scales flickered uncertain purple for just a moment. The third trial. Unity. You must create something together that proves you understand each other. You have until sunset. The arena floor was filled with materials. Stone, ice, metals, crystals. Tommy and Zarketh looked at each other. They didn't need words anymore. They began to work. Tommy shaped and arranged while Zarketh used his plasma breath to melt and fuse. Hours passed like minutes. The watching crowds, both dragon and human, leaned forward. As the sun touched the horizon, they finished. A sculpture stood in the center of the arena, a dragon and a human embracing, merged together so perfectly that you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Tommy's handprints were pressed into the surface. Zarketha's scales were embedded in the stone, still glowing. Together, Tommy said. Zarketha's scales flashed through every color at once. Together, Empress Zalnara stared at the sculpture, her scales flickering between colors so rapidly it looked like static. The Dragon Council waited for her judgment. Every dragon, every human held their breath. "No, Zalnara is finally. I will not accept this mockery. The softskins must die. All of them." She roared, and half the dragons in the arena roared back in agreement. Warriors began descending into the crucible, plasma building in their throats. Captain Webb shouted orders, and humans raised their weapons. The peace had lasted less than a minute. But then Velkara stepped forward, placing herself between Zalnara and her brother. "I challenge your judgment, Empress." They passed every trial. "You dare!" Zalnara's scales went blood red. "I dare because I watched my brother become something better than what we are," Velkara said, her voice carrying across the arena. "We call ourselves warriors, but we slaughter the weak. We call ourselves strong, but we fear anything different. That small creature showed more courage today than our entire council." Other dragons began shifting positions. Not many, but enough. Enough to matter. Zalnara saw her power fracturing. In desperation, she launched herself toward Tommy, her jaws open wide. If she couldn't have war through law, she'd start through blood. Zarketh moved faster than thought. He intercepted his Empress mid-flight, their bodies crashing together with a sound like thunder. They rolled across the arena floor, claws and teeth flashing. The exiled dragon, the broken warrior, fought with everything he had, not from rage, not from instinct, from love. Tommy stood frozen, watching his friend fight. Sarah tried to grab him through the drone, screaming his name. Captain Webb ordered his people to fire, but the dragons moved too fast, too close together. Zarketh didn't try to kill Zalnara. He pinned her down, his weight holding her against the stone, his jaws around her throat, but not biting, not killing, just holding. "Submit," he rumbled in dragon language, "or I will do what you wanted me to be." Zalnara thrashed, but Zarketh was stronger. Her rage had made her sloppy. His love had made him focused. Finally, her scales shifted to submission blue. Zarketh released her and stepped back, standing between the Empress and Tommy. The arena went silent again. A dragon had defeated the Empress without killing. It shouldn't have been possible. Velkara walked to the center and addressed the council. By our oldest laws, leadership can be challenged. I claim the right to lead. All in favor. Show your colors. Blue scales began appearing throughout the arena. Not all, but more than half. The peaceful dragons, the ones who'd watched the trials and felt something shift inside themselves, they chose differently. Captain Webb lowered his weapon slowly. Stand down. He ordered his people. Stand down. In the center of the arena, Tommy walked past all the dragons to his friend. Zarketh was injured, bleeding from a dozen wounds. The boy touched the largest cut, his small hand barely covering it. You're hurt, Tommy said, his voice small. Efrar, Yend is safe. Zarketh rumbled. Worth it. Tommy did something then that changed everything. He turned to face the dragons, the humans, everyone watching. His voice was quiet but clear, carried by the microphone Sarah had placed. Please stop fighting. Funny Horse is nice. I'm nice. We can all be nice together. Being scared makes everyone hurt. Being friends makes everyone happy. Simple words from a simple truth. A child's wisdom that adults have forgotten. Zelnara pulled herself up, defeated but alive. She looked at Tommy, at Zarketh, at the sculpture they created. For the first time in centuries, something other than anger crossed her face. Perhaps, she said slowly, I have been Empress too long. The peace treaty took 3 days to negotiate. Velkara became the new Empress and immediately recognized the binding between Tommy and Zarketh as legitimate. The humans could stay. The dragons would share the planet. Both would learn from each other. Captain Webb and Velkara met daily, translating through Sarah's devices, building something new. The walls around the settlement came down. Dragons began landing in the square. Curious rather than hostile. Human children, braver than their parents, approached with drawings and offerings of food. 1 month later, Dr. Sarachin opened the first school. Dragon hatchlings and human children sat together, learning each other's languages through colors and pictures and patience. Tommy helped teach, showing the other kids that dragons weren't scary once you knew them. Zarketh healed slowly, his scales growing back stronger. He spent his days at the school, letting young humans climb on his back, while he told dragon stories in broken human words that improved daily. The planet was renamed in a ceremony attended by both species. Not by vote or by committee, but by Tommy's suggestion that everyone agreed with. Sanctuary, he said, a place where everyone is safe, where being different is okay, where funny horses and people are friends. 5 years passed. The settlement became a city. Towers built by human engineering stood beside caves carved by dragon plasma. Markets sold both human crops and dragon crystals. Interspecies marriages happened, not romantic but adoptive. Dragon hatchlings with human siblings. Human children with dragon guardians. When the first ship from Earth arrived, the crew couldn't believe what they saw. Their mission had been to rescue survivors from a hostile planet. Instead, they found humans and dragons building something together, living together, thriving together. Tommy, now 11 and more talkative but still preferring drawing to speaking, gave them a tour. He rode on Zarketh's back through the city, pointing out the community center, the mixed playground, the memorial to those lost in the early days. People were scared. Tommy explained to the shocked Earth delegates. Dragons were scared too. But Funny Horse showed me that different isn't bad. Different is just different, and different can be beautiful. Zarketh, whose name was now officially Funny Horse on all documents, served as ambassador of unity. His title was used across the growing network of human colonies. He traveled to other worlds, showing them what was possible. But he always came home to Sanctuary, to the river where a small boy had first called him a funny horse, to the city they'd built together, to the life they'd saved by choosing friendship over fear. In the park built around their sculpture from the Crucible, dragon hatchlings and human children played every day. They chased each other through the grass, laughed in 2 languages, and never once thought it was strange, because Tommy had been right all along. Being different wasn't something to fear. It was something to celebrate. And sometimes, the bravest thing anyone could do was see past the scary outside to the friend waiting within. The universe was vast and often cruel, but Sanctuary proved that it could also be kind. 1 funny horse and 1 brave boy at a time.